Excellent. Welcome, everyone. We're very excited to have you on with us today. And just as everyone is joining, it looks like we have a fair amount still joining from the waiting room. If you don't mind just dropping in the chat where you're joining us from, we are very excited to welcome several of our international attendees who have registered for today. So go ahead and just drop in the chat where you're joining us from today. It's always kind of fun to see where everyone's coming from. You might find somebody in the city next door, in your own city. It's always just a great chance to see who else is on the virtual webinar with you. Excellent. Yeah, we're seeing some Phoenix, Alaska. It's early for you, I feel like. Let's see, some Washington, Georgia, DC here, more Washington, got some Texas, Maine.
Hi, Kelly.
Yeah, Bob knows some of you.
I think almost everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, good array. Well, we're excited to have you on. Yes, we have somebody coming on from Amman, Jordan. Excellent. Welcome. Well, just to get started, my name is Cece Francisco. I'm part of the Institute staff. Very excited to bring you today's webinar speaker. Just as a couple quick reminders, Institute is a CAE and a CCE provider. So this webinar does qualify as 1 hour of CAE credit and 1 point of CCE credit. And you're able to request a webinar certificate by emailing us. I'm going to just drop this in the chat as well to the IOM inbox. And then as a reminder, both the recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint will be available in the Webinar and Resource Center, typically about 48 hours after the webinar. And there is an additional resource of a board orientation workbook that Bob has provided that's also available in the Webinars and Resource Center. So just going to drop in the chat where you can find that as well. And then if you do have any questions, due to time and just due to the volume of attendees we have on today, we do ask that you email Bob directly and include the IOM inbox as well with any questions that you have so that we can get those answered. Just due to time, we won't be able to host a typical Q&A session. So I'm just going to drop that email in the chat as well. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Bob Harris, who is a certified association executive, works with thousands of organizations to improve performance and outcomes. He works with business associations internationally and has been called, and I love this, the Martha Stewart of association management for providing tips and templates to make governance and management efficient. Simultaneous to his association work, he has worked in hospitality for Hyatt Hotels in Florida for 35 years. So with that said, Bob, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Cece. Great to see everybody. What a broader range of people attending. The topic today is board orientation. I believe that every board can do a really good job, but they fail many times. I think I use the D word too often with boards, or that would be dysfunction. But I see a lot of friends. I see faculty. I see new book authors. I see colleagues from Jordan. Hi, Bill. I see Lebanon businesswomen are here. Dory from North Menton, Lebanon. Industrialist is here. Talal Win from the Myanmar Young Entrepreneurs Association. There's chambers here from Kurdistan, Tajikistan. And I see the Wood Foundation that does work in Kenya and Rwanda. Jordan, Alaska, Maine. Wow, that's a lot. I happen to be in Florida today. But you know what's common to all 150 people who have registered for this session? It is that every organization has a board of directors. And I look at every board and I say, what holds you back? What's stopping you? These people have joined the board as a team. They have the ability to promote prosperity, to adopt standards of safety, to increase employment and jobs, one of the most important things in the world. In the board, sometimes they just get tangled up. They don't want to come to orientation. So what I'm going to do for you today is give you a lot of resources. If you look at the QR code in the first slide, that will download the slides to you if you'd like to do it that way. And you'll see QR codes throughout. So if you're on the internet, you take a picture of that just aim your camera at that. It will download the files that I'm sharing with you, and you'll have access to the PowerPoint too. So boards can do great things. The U.S. has 1.7 million boards of directors. And what stops them, I don't know, other than maybe they don't quite understand their job. So here's what happens. You're asked to serve on a board of directors, and usually the person looks down at the floor and their first thought is, whoa, this is going to look good on my resume. And they're not thinking about, well, what's the mission statement? And some board members, admittedly, they go to the bathroom, they come back in, and someone says, oh, we've decided you'd be a great treasurer. Those are not the best ways to get your board members. So boards need to have an orientation. And I hear all the time, well, we had an orientation last year. We don't need one this year. I was there 3 years ago. I don't see why I have to go to it. You need to do an orientation. When I look you in the eyes, I'm looking at your career. I want your career to be successful. So you've got to have a successful board and a successful organization. So you need to do an orientation. It may only take 90 minutes. That's not a big investment for a trustee who's responsible for advancing the organization. What happens usually at the board table is the new person goes, I won't say anything for the first 6 months. And all they do is listen. You should do annually. And if you see on the slide, I like to use the phrase refresh and blend. When you say orientation, it sounds like, oh, this is going to be a training. I've done it before. What could you teach me? And admittedly, most people don't know what governance is. They may be good at management in their practice setting, but they're not good at governance. So I call it refresh and blend because what I want to do is bring in the seasoned board members to be there to participate and make the new board members feel welcome. And it's a refresh for seasoned board members of where are we with our budget, where are we with our strategic plan. It's a great time for knowledge transfer. How can I be on a board if I don't receive the information that I need? So I like some of the groups, and you might want to share this one. They call it their rusty trustee. And they always have a senior board member who's there to help the board. And it's just kind of fun. It works. Whether the person is ex officio has a vote or not is up to you. I like board buddies. Got new people on the board. They're quiet. They're not sure what to say. A board buddy can turn to them and say, "Here's your role. Here's what that motion means." You've got to communicate the governing documents, and there's 6 of them, and I'm going to share that with you. I want the board to avoid micromanagement. My other phrase or spelling of micromanagement is snoopervision. The board is not responsible for managing the organization. The board is responsible for governing, and they don't know what governance is in many cases. And then I want a board that actually thinks about, are we advancing our mission statement? What is our mission statement? Do we all know it? Are we working towards the mission statement? Are we working towards the strategic plan? How many goals are in the plan? I'll share some of that. Here's a copy of what I have for you. This is a 20-page guide to board orientation. You can use this to do your own orientation. You can adapt it any way that will help you with orientation. There's a lot of tools out there. That's just one of them. But a nice thing about when you do board orientation, you do a good one, almost all of your board members are leaders in something else. And they may be on the Arts Council board, their state society of something, the battered women's shelter, whatever you teach them about governance, your orientation is going to benefit them elsewhere too. So that's for you, or you can use the QR code and take a picture of that and download it. Here is the commitment to serve on a board. And one of the IOM classes helped me with this. I want to give them credit for that. And in this particular case, the policy or the commitment has some teeth with it. It says in 2 pages, is what we expect of you. You're going to have to come to orientation. You have to be accountable. You have to be collaborative. You have to prepare for meetings. You have to read the information we send to you in advance. And then it goes on to say, if you don't do these things, we have the ability to dismiss you or put you in a different position. So this is a tool that you could adapt to any way you'd like, put it into your orientation, your leadership manual, make sure that they understand this is a commitment I'm going to use the word trustees and fiduciaries. They are trustees and fiduciaries. I think for some of our global friends, I also want to point out something, and for our U.S. friends, the average size board in the U.S. is 15 people. 15 people. 15 allows you to have a meaningful conversation at the table. The American Society of Association Executives says the larger the board, the more disengaged the board members. And it takes on that attitude about, well, I don't have to be there. They won't notice if I'm not there. Other people can do the job. So 15 tends to be the average, and there's a reason for that. It allows for a meaningful conversation. Most boards meet. Some of us work here. The board meets 3 times a year. There's many boards that meet quarterly. That's the usual. Some of them meet every other month, and maybe the committees will meet in the off months. And some of you, and I won't ask you to raise your hand, some of your boards meet every month. When that happens, and if you need backup on that, it requires 200 hours of staff time. You're putting on the meeting, you're giving it notice, you're getting out reports, you're finding out the quorum, you're ordering food, you're going to the meeting. They stop by your office and say, hey, I'm in the office, I want to know what you're doing. And as soon as they leave, you're getting ready for the next meeting. So if you've always done it that way, don't let that be the reason that you're meeting every month. Just explore what else could we do. So just giving you some best practices here. When I talk to board members, I'll call them trustees and fiduciaries. And I've had them look at me and go, Bob, you're in the wrong room. I'm a volunteer on this board. And I explain, but you are a trustee. You are responsible for making sure that we protect the assets, the intellectual property, that we advance the mission statement, that we serve the members. So you are a trustee. And when you use that term, it kind of shocks them just a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with it. In the USA, all of your organizations are corporations, and your board members are trustees of the corporation. So don't hesitate to use that. And they are also fiduciaries. The members cannot be at the board meeting. So the board of directors, they represent the interests of the members. So let me make it perfectly clear. And I know when I work with some international groups, there's probably some people on the board who think this is really good for them and they're going to get something out of it. The board member is there to represent the interests of members, not to represent themselves, not to represent their specialty or their boss. So trustee comes from being a corporate trustee. Fiduciary comes from being a fiduciary on behalf of the members who can't be at the meeting. And there's 3 legal principles that go with a fiduciary. And this is all explained in this book. So you can go through, mark it up, and do your own orientation. But as a fiduciary, all board members represent the interests of members. They have to practice duty of care. Duty of care means that they're asking the right questions. They came prepared to the meeting. They read the reports you sent to them in advance. They are tuned in and aware of what they're voting on. Duty of loyalty. They're loyal to the organization, not to themselves, not to their zip code, not to their county. They're loyal to your organization, duty of loyalty. And duty of obedience, obedient to the governing documents. So you've given them a leadership manual, a thumb drive, you've got something online, a virtual board site where they can get their governing documents. And I'll share what those documents are in just a second. So they are fiduciaries, they are trustees. So what I'm trying to do as I talk to you is take the height of the board up to 50,000 foot, because they'll come into the meeting and say, well, I don't really like the choice of chicken. Could we go to a different deli? And that's just not board service. I want them to achieve what they can. Here's the documents that they need to receive. So I'm looking at you. I want to protect you. Have you given them all the governing documents? This is in hierarchical order. Board members need to read to lead. So part of the orientation is making sure you've given them access to or given them the documents. So the mission statement, I just worked with a Texas statewide association. The board got the mission statement down to 8 words. That was their desire. So many of them are 20, 30, 40 words. And there is an expectation if you serve on a board, you should be able to recite the mission statement. So the mission statement in the US is your relationship to the IRS and the Department of Treasury. The articles of incorporation are your relationship with the internationally would be with the ministry, or in the USA would be with the state government division of corporations. You want to make sure you're incorporated for perpetuity of the corporation and for the volunteer immunity that comes with that corporate status. The bylaws is your relationship to the members. The board members very often don't think about where they got their authority from. They get their authority from the IRS, from the Division of Corporations in your state. The bylaws describes the relationship between the board and the membership. So the board's got to read the bylaws. A lot of you ask the board members if they read the bylaws, and they start looking up at the ceiling and go, "Yeah, I'll get around to it right after the basketball game tonight." So bylaws is a relationship to the members. The members enforce the bylaws. The IRS enforces a mission. The state division of corporations enforces the corporate status. Policies are the wisdom of the board of directors before, so the prior board members. You may have a policy on antitrust avoidance or Competition Act. You may have a policy on investing money. You may have a policy on guests attending meetings, which is not a requirement by law, even though the members might tell you that. So policies, 25 to 50 policies in your policy manual. Policies do not go in the bylaws. Policies do not go in the bylaws. They go into a compendium with just policies. Strategic plan is a roadmap. So the 4 or 5 goals that are in the plan, that's the roadmap for the board of directors. You never want a chief elected officer to come in and go, well, when I'm the head of the organization, here's what I want us to do. You want them to pick up the strategic plan and say, my job is to advance the strategic plan. And then the annual budget is driven by the strategic plan, not the other way around. So if you've got something you wanted to achieve, a new office building, a new exit at the highway, a big program, you're going to put it in the strategic plan and make the budget work. So the budget comes under the strategic plan. So I would put all these into a leadership manual. Welcome to the board. When you do orientation, here's the information they've received. They also have protections, and they have to read these. They have something called voluntary immunity, the doctrine of voluntary immunity in the USA. And if they're following the governing documents, working within the governing documents, they have voluntary immunity. So you've got to have some proof that you gave it to them. Put it into the minutes that they had access to, or you gave them the governing documents. Oops. I like them to sign for something. And this is, again, to protect you. So it could be, I like to keep it short. So there in this slide, and you can download the tab, that they receive the governing documents. That's to protect you and to protect them. Now volunteer immunity kicks in. That they know what the mission statement is, and they're here to advance the member, is to serve the members, not themselves. That they respect confidentiality, and they understand that they don't speak for your organization. They have authority from gavel to gavel. They do not speak. They don't leave the meeting and say, oh, let me go talk to the government and tell them what we're doing in the organization. They are not the spokesperson for the organization. The chief elected officer is. They will disclose conflicts of interest because in the U.S. model, it is expected that anyone on a board of directors discloses conflicts of interest at least annually. And more often, by asking this question at the board meeting, does anyone have a conflict with anything on today's agenda? They will avoid competition law, antitrust violations. Many of you know from classes at IOM that fine can run $10 million. So you've got something to protect you, to say, yes, I told them that. And I've been in court a couple of times where the judge said, first of all, let me ask you, did you ever give them something on antitrust? Yes, I did. And then finally, they support the decisions of the board. They don't leave the meeting and say, well, I'm totally against that. They have authority to speak up in the meeting, not after the meeting. I asked the board to always be at the proper altitude. Here's the altitude, 50,000 foot. And if you look up, this is where the board often stays. We're in the weeds. I keep this on the board table, or I ask someone at the board to be in charge of the weed sign. All they have to do is wave it a little bit, and people go, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take us into the weeds. But the board is at 50,000 foot. they're looking beyond their term of office. They're looking at your organization to say, what could we do in 2025 and 2026? They've got a vision for the organization. They're not worried about how many entrees we're serving at the annual meeting. They are looking at what could we do? What do we need to do for our organization to be sustainable, to be great, and to achieve results? The committees work for the board of directors. They get their authority from the board and the bylaws. Committees do not sit down and say, hey, what do you want to do this year? So doing an orientation, I want the board to understand how the committees relate to them. And I would consider inviting the committee chairs and vice chairs into orientation too. The professional staff, 10,000 foot. You're doing thousands of things that the board never knows what you're doing. Hopefully they appreciate you for what you do. There's my weed sign. Doesn't hurt to have it at the table. And here's what I expect of a board. And I say this a lot of times to boards, and they'll go, oh, we never thought about being entrepreneurial. Well, we didn't think we should be innovative. So I look for the board to be strategic, not tactical, not tactical. That takes them into the weeds or up a tree and down a rabbit hole. Innovative. What can they do with the resources, the committees, the professional staff, the talent of the board? What could they do to create and serve the members better? Entrepreneurial. What could they do to bring in more money? I look at your budgets and I make them a pie chart, and I see you only have 50% from events, 50% from dues. I'm looking for more entrepreneurship. What else could you bring into the organization? And I want them to be bold, to go forth and really do something. So when they end their year, here's my tattoo on my right bicep. Board governs and staff manages. Comes in many languages, but this is it. This is the success. If I can get the board to stay away from micromanagement, to know that their job is not supervision, their job's not to evaluate or to be hiring your staff, and their job is to advance the organization and the strategic plan and serve the members and protect the assets of the organization. I do always want to tell the board, in return for good governance, we are protecting them. So it's going to be a little bit different on the national fronts. You don't have some of the same laws. In the US, we have a lot of litigation. So I think all of you have purchased D&O insurance on the board, directors and officers insurance. I like to pass that policy around once a year so that they understand that we are insuring them. And in return for buying $1 million policy or more on them, we're expecting good governance. They have volunteer immunity. I explained to you that comes from state government. Volunteer immunity is if they're on the board and they're working within the governing documents, and I just told you what the governing documents are, they have volunteer immunity from being sued. Now, if you decide to put on a big event and you ask your volunteers to sell beers in the beer truck to raise money, that's not in your bylaws. That's not going to be covered. You're incorporated, so there's a corporate veil. I could sue the organization, but not the board members. And some of you have indemnification. And all of you should know whether you have indemnification or not. And you need to be able to explain to the board what it is. So indemnification, if you have it in your bylaws, if it does say that, that means that a board member who got themselves in trouble with actions at the board table could actually get an attorney and ask the rest of the board, the organization, to consider reimbursing them for their legal expenses. So you have to know whether you have indemnification or not. Do you have enough resources in your assets to actually respond if one of your board members said something wrong on Facebook, lost some money as treasurer? Would you be able to indemnify them? I didn't say any of the cartoon. I paid for the rights to this. I didn't say anything during the meeting, but I don't agree with the rest of the board on this issue. I said it earlier, the board members have authority from gavel to gavel. They do not have authority to leave the meeting and speak for the organization or to speak against the organization. So this is a way to let them know, hey, our chief elected officer is the spokesperson. They may delegate that to the chief staff person, but no board member can get on TV in the newspaper or city hall and say, hey, you want to know what we're doing or what we're doing at the board table. So this is a nice way to make sure that they understand that they speak up in the meeting, not after the meeting. After the meeting, the most appropriate thing for a board member to say is, I support the decisions of the board of directors. I support the decisions of the board of directors. I like to encourage the board to do their own evaluation. If you think about it, boards evaluate at least 4 things in the organization. They evaluate, one, the CEO, chief paid person. They evaluate the budget. How are we doing with that in the financial statements? They evaluate progress on the strategic plan. And I'd like them to evaluate themselves. Now, you don't present it to them and say, okay, we're going to evaluate you at this meeting. That's something that the chairman of the board needs to say, just want to make sure we're doing the best that we can. Fill this out. Let me know if you think there's ways to improve the organization. Should we meet every other month? Could we meet quarterly? Should we be serving a meal? Is that a distraction? Do we have ex officios in the room? Do we have guests in the room? Is that a distraction? But use the board evaluation to always improve your board performance. My favorite statement of recent, and an association in Philadelphia brought it to my attention, General Colin Powell, great leaders are always great simplifiers. We give board members so many pages of report. When I read your agendas, there's an average of 17 reports and updates on the agenda. That's not governance. I want them to have the opportunity to understand what's in the strategic plan, to know what the mission statement is, to understand the presentation with dashboards. So let me share some of these with you. So anytime you can make it simple or brief is better, do your best to do that. Use graphics. No one reads anymore. Here's an agenda, and when you tell me your agenda always looks the same, it's always looked this way, I would encourage you to meet with the chief elected officer and say, is this the best agenda that we can do? Now, there's a couple of nice things about this particular agenda. The mission statement is boxed in at the bottom. It notes that they accept the financial statement. They don't approve it. They accept the financial statement. They have a consent agenda, so all the reports were sent out in advance. So anyone at the table could say, you know, we all got those reports. We're fiduciaries. I read the reports. We should have all read the reports. I make a motion that we accept those reports as presented. You just save 30 minutes an hour at the board table. Now, how do I keep the goals from the strategic plan in front of the board? They could always be on the board table. Here's one. This one is on cardstock. This is a $50 million organization. This is always on the board table. When a committee or a board member says, I've got a good idea, the chair knows to say, well, which part of our strategic plan are you advancing? So I hope that you're doing something where the plan is always on the table. In this one, the plan's goals, A, B, C, and D, are right on the agenda. That's what you want the board to talk about. I don't want them listening to reports that they could have read in advance. I want them to talk about the mission, which is on the agenda, and the goals that's on the agenda. That will make them feel fulfilled, that they're really advancing your strategic plan and serving the membership. One of the things you'll notice on this agenda is there's no new business. I have taken new business off the end of an agenda because it's the worst time when people are looking at their watches and saying, oh, I got to get out of here. And the chair goes, well, wait a minute, let's see if there's any new business. And then this bomb goes off when someone goes, well, I've got a good idea. So what I ask is when you send out the agenda, I ask the board members to advise, do they have new business for you? Now, I think I have a sample. This is a new tool also. This is when the agenda goes out. It asks the board members, if you have new business, please bring it to our attention before the meeting. So now I'm not ending the meeting with, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have time. I'm instead saying, okay, we heard your new business. We know how we can slot it in, or we can talk to that board member, and we can see how it fits into the strategic plan. So I like this form. If you think it might be valuable to you, adapt it. The other thing I like in meetings for board members is dashboards. So here's the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce. Michael from IOM faculty designed it for this chamber. There's financial statements on the left, and the important information they should track is on the right. Membership is up or down. Retention rate is up or down. We've had visitors on our social media. We've had money in our political action committee, money in our foundation. You can do it all on one page. So now I'm making the board meeting experience something they can understand, and they start seeing the same information at every meeting. Here's another one. This is from Arkansas. What you're doing is you're asking the board, what would you like to see at every meeting? And then you're presenting the same dashboard at every meeting. So this board said they wanted to see financials, they wanted to see member satisfaction, they wanted to see engagement, they wanted to see registrations. And then the board gets used to that, and you don't have to say, okay, now we have another 5-minute report, another 10-minute report, and they ask questions and they fall asleep. Here's another one. This is out of Georgia. And I should have said, we've got guests on the call from Georgia, but it's not the state of Georgia, it's the Republic of Georgia. So Tina and everyone over in Georgia, it's good to see you. This is a dashboard from from an organization in the state of Georgia. But you can see what you're doing is you're asking the board, what is it you'd like me to present? And then they get used to seeing the same information at every meeting instead of, okay, now it's time for the vice president's report. Now it's time for the treasurer's. Now it's time for, and it just drives them crazy. Also on brief is better. And what General Colin Powell said is that great leaders can simplify. This is a strategic plan that the board members carry in their wallet. So this plan at the mission is at the bottom, and the 6 goals are on the business card. So anytime someone says, "Oh, you're on the board, tell me more about the organization," a board member can pull it out and say, "Well, I happen to have our plan right here. Here's our mission, here's our goals, here's what we're doing for you." Nod your head. Do you like that idea? Yeah? Okay, super. Here's the Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, and I don't think they made it on the call tonight. They've got 7 goals in their strategic plan, but my question to all of you would be, is your strategic plan in a format where you're able to go into an office to renew or sell a membership or sponsorship, and they say, tell me what the chamber's doing, and you've got a nice looking brochure. So I like that. Here's another plan. This is Talal. I think you're on the call from the Association of Lebanon Industrialists. I know you have a new one. This is the last version. 5 goals, a mission, and a vision. That's what I want on the board table. I would frame that. I'd put it in the boardroom. I'd put it on a pop-up banner for $99 wherever you go. There's your strategic plan right in front of all your stakeholders. Uzbekistan, that's their strategic plan. Always sits on the board, on the board table. This has more value to me when someone says, why should I join, than a membership brochure. This says what we're going to do for you in the next 3 years. Now, if I wanted to, I could turn it over and I could have a list of my board members on the back. I might have a list of committees on the back where they could decide, well, how can I be more engaged in the organization? CC, any questions, any thoughts? I'm reading your body language, even though I can't see you.
No, you're doing great. We don't have any questions coming in yet, so you're good.
Okay. I see people writing things down, so I can tell what's going on there. Who's this? MTM Abu Dhabi? And their strategic plan. Again, it's just, do you have to make it 10 or 20 pages and no one reads past page 2? Or can you say, this is our plan and it serves to sell sponsorships, to sell memberships, to renew members, to distinguish you from another organization that might sound like you? So AmCham Abu Dhabi. New Mexico Restaurant Association, this is their strategic plan. Advocate, engage. So advocate, they represent the interests of their members. Engage, we want our members to be engaged, participating in the organization. Elevate, we want to provide professional development designations, certifications for our membership. And innovative, as a board of directors, we're going to be innovative in what we do for the association. Just 4 goals, that's it. Mission at the top, vision at the bottom. So I hope all of you are saying, yep, this looks just like ours. Good work. Those that just nodded your head. So let's keep going. Board meetings. I said, could you, if you're meeting monthly, could you try every other month? Save yourself 200 hours. If you're meeting every other month, could you meet quarterly? It's not hard to design an agenda that's good for 60 days instead of 30 days. And you may say to me, well, Bob, my board members won't be engaged. But let's go back. They're trustees, they're fiduciaries, they have a responsibility to do that. So in your meetings, a lot of you in your bylaws will actually say that they have to follow Robert's Rules of Order. And it references the current edition. Well, the current edition is 816 pages. I'm not a big fan of putting that into my bylaws. Yes, you'll have access to the slides, Candy. Nice to see you. I am a big fan of the Red Book, ABCs of Parliamentary Procedure. And it's cartoon format so that no board member, it's 16 pages, no board member could say they didn't understand it. So if you really say in your bylaws that you have to follow Robert's Rules of Order current edition, then you better have it at the table or make it available to the board members. Or you could just say in your bylaws that the board of directors will select a form of parliamentary procedure, and then you adapt what you want rather than the full Robert's Rules of Order. I don't want Rules of Order to slow down the progress of the board. Have you all gotten one or two tips so far? Okay. Let's see, meeting ground rules. These are not in the bylaws, but it's good to have meeting ground rules. So some of the ground rules could be, and on the right side is a menu of all the ground rules I could think of. On the left side is a California organization that adopted these ground rules so that the board members know what to expect. For example, we're going to start and end on time. We value your time. We're going to send you reports. As a fiduciary, you have to read the reports in advance. We are going to ask you to turn off your digital distractions during the meeting. We're going to ask you to chair a committee. Whatever it is that you can say, this is the ground rules that this year's board agrees to. So your chief elected officer and the staff person is going to come up with what the ground rules are. They're not in the bylaws, but it's helpful to have. Hey, turn off your phones, respect everyone. I like it when one of these ground rules is, before you speak a second and a third time, please look around the room and make sure everyone else has had a chance to speak. So that's another reason for these ground rules. I always carry Elmo with me wherever I go. There's Elmo. Elmo, it stands for ELMO. Enough, let's move on. So it's really the same as someone saying, Mr. Chair, I call the question, and you decide to move on from there. Elmo is just a funner way to say that. When someone goes, where's Elmo? We've talked about this too much. So don't think that you couldn't have that on the board table or on the bookshelf. And pretty soon people are going to be going, where's Elmo? But I want you to get through everything on the agenda. I want you to focus on advancing the mission. I want the board satisfied that they're really working on the 4 or 5 goals. I will look at all of you and I say, if you have more than 6 or 7 goals in your strategic plan, all your plan is a to-do list for the staff. 4 or 5 goals is usually it. I work with the American Dental Association, 3 goals in their strategic plan. So you're not looking for a wish list. At the board table and with the board, there's some things that I would be cautious about. I don't like a board to go into executive session without the staff being in there. So I want my chief staff officer in all meetings. Without the staff person there, a couple of years later, someone might say, well, is that when you guys started talking about, well, we heard it in the Oklahoma County Commission this week, but is that when you talked about the blackballing a member? Is that when you talked about antitrust? I want a staff person in the executive session. Thank you. So if you do have executive session, what I'd like to do is before the board goes into executive session without anyone in the room, without any staff or guests in the room, that you simply say, well, let me know what you're going to talk about. I'll make a note in the minutes. So it could be the CEO performance review. It could be a confidential contract. Lazy motions is when board members vote on something and they haven't asked, what are we voting on? So I've seen a board member vote, they thought they were buying tacos for lunch, but they actually sold the office building. Rump sessions, what are rump sessions? Rump sessions are when board members get together before the board meeting and they decide how they're going to vote. So they get the agenda and they see some things on there and they call a buddy and go, hey, what's this mean? How should we vote on this? They need to come to the meeting fresh and listen to all the ideas. They should not be having a rump session to decide. And abstentions, a lot of times I'll see that someone in your board meeting has abstained when I read the bylaws. And then I'll go back and I'll look for the conflict of interest. And there was not a conflict of interest disclosed. You abstain when you have a conflict of interest. You don't abstain just because you feel like abstaining. Remember, I said you're a trustee, you have authority from gavel to gavel. You're expected to come to the meeting prepared as a fiduciary and to vote. So with this book is a quiz, there's a quiz that goes with it to see if the board really does understand their fiduciary and trustee roles. So it's a pop-up quiz. You can leave it on the board table. You can put it in their board packet. You can use it at orientation. But it asks, well, how do we protect the board? D&O, indemnification, volunteer immunity. Do we have a mission and vision? What are our resources that we have to protect? What's the difference to different audits? So one page, it's a nice discussion with the board. It would take a nice 20 minutes. When you do board orientation, I think it's 90 minutes to 2 hours. If you do it yourself, that's okay. There's always potential for conflict of interest, perception of that. So you could use someone from an organization nearby or the state CCE or the state SAE to do your orientation. Here's another quiz. You're serving on the board. What do you know about the organization? This will tell you an awful lot. Do you know our mission statement? Well, no. Do you know how many members do we have? Do you know what market share we have? Do you know approximately what our budget is and what our assets are? This is a great discussion with the board. Thank you. So 2 books for the board table. Mr. Pelusi, I think you're on the call. The Essential Handbook for Nonprofit Leaders. The book is 11 days old. It's at Amazon. I don't have a financial interest in it. My name's on the front of it. But I wanted you to know what a great tool for your bookshelf. What a great tool to have at the board table. And then the other one, The Perfect Board, my name's on the front of that too. And it is exactly what we want, is the best board possible. So both of those I think are valuable, and I wanted you to know about the new one by IOM author for faculty, Bill Pelusi, Amazon.com. Here's what I say to all of you. The most successful business organizations don't behave like a garden club. And I see lots of boards that think they're a garden club. Show up late, open the packet of the board table, never had time to read it, have missed the last 3 meetings, want you to catch them up. It's a business. You can have for-profit subsidiaries, you can have a foundation, you can have a political action committee, but it is a business and they are trustees responsible for advancing the business, protecting the assets, and serving the customers, the members. So my favorite there is don't act like a garden club, act like a business. And then my second famous statement is from 1970, where most of you don't know that we sent 3 men to the moon tried to send them to the moon from Florida. And they got a call back and they said, Houston, we have a problem. And they were running out of oxygen on that flight to the moon. So NASA did everything they could to bring them back to Earth safely. That's where the phrase failure is not an option. So when I talk to boards, I always say failure is not an option. You understand you're a trustee, a fiduciary, you know what the assets are, you know what our member market share is, you know your relationship to the staff, you know the relationship between the committees and the board. Failure is not an option, but CC, I see it all the time. Houston, we have a problem. And that's board members that are dysfunctional, can't get along. They think that they should be paid or there's something in it for them. And to everyone on the line around the country, around the world, our board members all are volunteers. We do not pay them. So that's an important thing to also know. That would be it, Cece. I think I hit the 45-minute mark. And if there's anything that someone wants to email me directly, I've seen some of your notes. All of those QR codes you can download. You can access them, and adapt them to your own organization. Jessica, you're welcome. It's my honor to be here.
Excellent.
Cece,
Yes, we have a lot of, just a lot of thank you in the comments. There was a question, but I will go ahead and just drop your email in the chat. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. And Bob, thank you so much. I know it's been so helpful to hear this. And I could also see everyone jotting down notes, so I know that it was well received. Just as a reminder to those that did not hear the announcement at the beginning, so because we are a CAE and CCE provider, this webinar does qualify for 1 hour of CAE credit and 1 point for CCE credit, and you can request that webinar certificate at the IOM inbox. And then this was recorded, so if you had to step out or came in early or came in late, came in early, great job. If you missed the first part, this was recorded and will be available on the Institute webinar and resources, as well as the board manual that Bob referenced. And if you have any questions, again, just email Bob and the IOM inbox. I'm dropping those in the chat. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today, and we look forward to having you on the next one. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Institute. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.